Allora ragazzi, direi che è davvero il momento di partire con un video che volevo vedere. Tra poche ore esce la nuova espansione di World of Warcraft, giusto? Bene. Abbiamo già visto recentemente dei video che hanno parlato proprio di The War Within. Adesso però c'è una intervista piuttosto lunghetta, non troppo a dire la verità, però che voglio davvero vedere, di Chris Metzen. Per chi non sapesse di chi si tratta, è il creatore originale della saga di Warcraft, ok? Ed è recentemente rientrato in Blizzard, sempre per chi non lo sapesse. E è stato uno dei motivi per cui mi si è sciolto un po' il cuore, perché, sapete, i vecchi fan Blizzard come me, o meglio, vecchi barra ex fan Blizzard, si ricordano ovviamente Chris Metzen come, diciamo, il papà di World of Warcraft e dell'intero franchise, d'accordo? È stata pubblicata proprio poche ore fa una intervista a Chris Metzen che parla proprio di tutta la World Soul Saga, che saranno le prossime 3 espansioni di World of Warcraft, quindi voglio vederla insieme a voi questa, ok? Bene, adesso datemi un secondo, eccoci qua, via musica di sottofondo, bam, eccoci qua, ecco qua. Pronto, allora ci sono i sottotitoli che però sono... I sottotitoli in inglese sono tradotti in automatico, non dovrebbero fare così schifo, d'accordo? Si potrebbe riuscire a vederli, spero, decentemente. Vai.
I didn't think Zerglings, morphing into orcs would work, but
no, I didn't either.
It's been a privilege working on Zergorks.
Hi, I'm Scott Johnson, the host of the World of Warcraft podcast, The Instance, and today I'm sitting here with Chris Metzen. Chris?
Scott, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you. How you feeling?
Quanto tempo?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's a crazy time. We're about to launch The War Within and, really kick off this massive World Soul Saga.
Zalei, grazie mille del follow.
Which is a trip because, I haven't shipped a video game in, 8 or 9 years. So it's kind of wild going through this process again and just kind of feeling that anticipation, excited to see what people think, and when the product finally gets into people's hands, it's one of my favorite parts of the whole development process.
Well, let me ask you this question, because you reminded me of how long this has been going. I remember firing up the World of Warcraft OG vanilla World of Warcraft and seeing a trailer that said celebrating 10 years of Warcraft. And I remember then thinking, you got to be kidding me, that's insane. That's how long I've been playing these games. And now we're 20 years on top of that, 30 years total.
Ridendo e scherzando, sono 20 anni di WoW,
especially given that you were here for most of that, had a bit of a break, now you're back.
Io non l'ho giocato dall'inizio, però il mio primo personaggio l'ho creato durante il vanilla. Era quasi finito, stava per arrivare la prima espansione, Burning Crusade, però tecnicamente gioco dal vanilla, sì.
It's really weird, being a little older, a little wiser. Feels like 100 years ago, feels like 5 minutes ago, all at the same time. So when I look at
microtransazioni predatorie, basta non comprarle.
Now, thankfully, there's an immediacy of it all to me. It's just, we live and die by, how good, the things we're sculpting in real time is. Trying to hold it all in your head, the weight of the past, it's kind of beyond me. I can't really wrap my head around like all the history all at once. I mean, there's kids graduating college right now named Jaina and Anduin. It's like, what?
Cosa?
I often find it's not all that helpful to overdwell on, in the course of development.
Gente che si laurea che di nome fa Jaina o Anduin.
So that's how I try and balance it
Fighissimo.
out. One day I'll look back and go, wow.
Visto l'apertura del portale, partecipato alla battaglia? No, ancora no. Faccio tutto quanto al lancio. Cazzo di palle. Scusate un attimo, ragazzi. Mamma mia, tutte le volte. Sono stato bannato di nuovo. Niente, TikTok ha cominciato a non amare le reaction. Vabbè, al diavolo, basta, mi sono stufato. Scusate dell'interruzione.
That you named and that you developed and saw grow and evolve and everything. Something that's interesting about War Within so far, to me, is we're seeing the gang kind of back together in a much more complete way. So you're seeing Anduin talking to Thrall with Jaina nearby, and Khadgar, my favorite worst wizard of all time, but I love him. He's there. They're all there. Yeah. And what that tells me is that we're in for some coming together of a lot of strings, a lot of stuff that has been out there for 20 years that will finally converge in some meaningful ways. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I'll break it down. When I came back, I'm like, all right, let's go, World of Warcraft. Like, what do we got? What are we making? And they were in, they had already been doing War Within, or what would become, War Within, for about 10 months. While I liked what they were building and thought it was a cool next chapter in WoW, in my head, I'm like, for the 20th anniversary of WoW, like, I want to have a feeling, like whatever the product becomes, I want to have a feeling of pulling all the toys out of the toy box, right? They like older characters, the kind of macro themes that, the series has been about all these years, Titans, Old Gods, Light and Dark.
Cioè, la terza volta in una settimana mi sto rompendo i coglioni, mi sa che lascio perdere. Okay.
Like this
Ammazzeranno tutti i personaggi principali. Allora ragazzi, sto sentendo dei rumor sulla storia di WoW piuttosto preoccupanti su qualcosa che forse succederà durante la storia, quindi non lo so, spero tanto di non beccarmi uno spoiler. Io ancora non so niente, sono solo dei rumor che girano che dico qualcosa di grosso succederà. Vabbè, ok.
And ultimately proofing out that there has been this storyline all the way through, that everything kind of converges into this crescendo. And in a very real way, how the War Within was shaping up, they're like, yeah, dude, like there's no way on earth, right? That that's going to divert the course of mighty rivers. There's no way to get that done on top of what we're already in production on. So that begat this idea of a larger saga. I'm like, okay, well, what if we can get there in
ma non ti preoccupare dell'hating, lo riciclo come content. Almeno quegli idioti si rendono utili a qualcosa, non ti preoccupare per me. Grazie del supporto.
And somehow folks, bought in on it. Like, whoa, that's wild. Let's go.
Grazie mille.
And so Taryn Gregory and I, Taryn's our principal story developer. So we work together every day, and we talk a lot about, like, we want to involve all these epic characters, but like when they're in the scene, they eat all the oxygen and they could just go off and solve for X. So it's this balance between including all these mega characters and then finding clever ways to get them out of the way, so that the player has maximum agency and the newer characters we're introducing have space to breathe and live.
It sounds like it is almost an advantage to come to something that had already been started. If you'd come to the end of Dragonflight and started from there, that's a little big, it's a bigger buy. It's like, well, wait a minute, where are we going now? We've been flying, okay, what does that mean? What do we do? And instead, you were presented with some beginnings, and then you got to decide where those beginnings took you.
And vector it a little bit, the trick to, after all these years, creative direction, which even today, I don't know that I could do a thesis on, right? Creative direction is as unique as the person doing it and the chemistry of the team that you're working with. But kind of finding that balance again of having
stasera la tentazione di giocare anche questa espansione è davvero fortissima. Io non ho hype, ho curiosità. Io la voglio giocare almeno per provare i dells.
Kind of the things that they are most passionate about, the ideas that they're kind of dug in on, and finding a way to bend everything towards a singular purpose, but boosting their sense of ownership.
So when you got up on stage at BlizzCon, it was pretty magical for players. I can say that for myself, and a lot of people that I know, and a lot of fans of the game saw this as a return to something. And I think we're coming off an excellent expansion in Dragonflight. But you got up and did something that surprised everybody.
Eccellente, non so se è la parola giusta, però dai, devo ammettere che è una buona espansione, sì.
We are going to do a trilogy of
Mattia, ciao.
Games. You spoke a lot about
okay,
bringing,
ben trovato.
Tying up some loose ends, but also creating a saga that is 3 parts, at least, and setting up really the next 20 years of the game, perhaps. That's very different than what any of you have done up to this point. Did that present unique challenges to the way you wanted to create story, the way you wanted your characters to progress, these sorts of things?
Parte fra tipo 2 ore e 20, l'anteprima. L'early access.
Under the hood a little bit, it's interesting in how, when I came back on the team, the development process and even the conceptualizing process, like where does the expansion take place? What are the main themes? What's the focus? Really had become much more democratized, right? And people were, had kind of found their voice in the balance of all the special teams that comprise the World of Warcraft team. you know, they'd really built the vision of Dragonflight together. So as I came back in,
Hunter, grazie mille dei
and,
bits.
you know, there were folks going like, oh, wow, how is this going to change our dynamic? You know, in terms of, you know, being a creative director, like, will we still have
Sì,
a voice?
Dragonflight
Will we
dai,
still,
mi è piaciuta,
you know,
non posso dire di no.
have stakes in how this all shapes out. So, like I was saying earlier, kind of learning
Un po'
that
troppo
again,
emotiva
learning that
come
balance again,
espansione,
and
forse.
coming in as creative
La
director,
storia,
like,
santi
no,
Dio,
I'm not
davvero
here
un
to
po'
be,
troppo.
hyper prescriptive with everything as I
Però vabbè.
might have been as a younger dude, but like really listening for the team's instincts. Like what are they responding to? What do they want to build? What do the artists want to make? What are they imagining in terms of that pure vision? So on top of that, the complexity of, I mean, I don't think this gives up the ghost on anything. Like, we're building 3 of these at a time. This is, yeah, I'll say it. It's insane. It's insane,
Yeah.
right? On top of the team, you know, over a year ago, having committed to like an 8-week cadence. Yeah. So these folks are, we are moving so fast, you know, and so
No, il personaggio su WoW non viene mai cancellato, puoi lasciarlo anche là 10 anni.
Like, way ahead of the caravan, which is its own really interesting kind of work, right? You know, checking in with everybody. Does this feel cool? Everybody hip, you know?
Allora, fatemi dire una cosa perché sta chiedendo anche qualcuno in chat, ve lo anticipo direttamente. Uno dei più grossi problemi di WoW, specie se vi interessa seguire la storia, è che, francamente, per chi comincia a giocare oggi, non si capisce una fava di niente. Vi consiglio una cosa. Prendete un video di YouTube che riassume tutto quello che è successo prima dell'espansione che state giocando in quel momento là. Cioè, se il momento che adesso non so dove ti buttano ancora in Battle for Azeroth, non mi ricordo più. Non so dove ti buttano, però quando inizi il gioco, fatti i primi 10 livelli, non mi ricordo dove vai a finire. Ecco, quell'espansione là. Vatti a vedere un video di YouTube che riassume tutto quanto fino a quell'espansione là, altrimenti non capisci assolutamente niente perché il gioco non te lo spiega. E questo è uno dei più grossi problemi di WoW e francamente non ho idea di come risolveranno la cosa. Soprattutto BFA fino al 60 sì, e poi Shadowlands fino al 70 e Dragonflight fino all'80? Come funziona adesso? E mo che esce quella nuova? Si saltano espansioni un po' per volta? Come cazzo? Cioè, l'organizzazione della storia è un delirio. Ora poi c'è da dove iniziare? È cambiato un'altra volta? Vabbè, comunque, a grosso modo, vi dico, la storia di WoW, recuperatela da un video su YouTube. Davvero. Lasciate perdere. Ti hanno buttato in Dragonflight a posto, allora devi vederti un video di tutta quanta la storia di World of Warcraft fino a Dragonflight. Trova uno di quelli e diciamo rimedia così perché altrimenti non ti aiuterà nessuno in game. Questo è una grossa lacuna del gioco. Final Fantasy XIV te la fa vivere tutta quanta, dall'inizio senza risparmiarti niente, anche roba di 10 anni fa, tutta quanta. E questo è un bene.
I want to make sure that we're building things that, you know, not only, again, my instinct feels are cool and fun, but that the team is proud to build and that they feel they have a voice in and, you know, can express themselves through where the story's going, what the ideas are. We're already mapping out, whatever, 13.1 and 13.2.
Sì, Final Fantasy XIV non perdi niente, anzi sono tornati indietro a rimettere a posto alcune cosette. I dungeon vecchi del lancio del gioco iniziale sono stati rifatti. Sì. Le storie valgono la pena, tipo quella di Legion è bella, ma come cazzo la recuperi?
The next few, upwards of like 17, and it's just keeping the conveyor belt going. It's like we're loud and clear. The fans want more content, more regularly. So,
no, purtroppo ragazzi è peggio di così, nel senso le espansioni non sono storie, insieme fanno tutte parte di una main story in continuo svolgimento. Sì e no. WoW lo puoi seguire filato soltanto se lo giochi mano a mano che esce, perché se poco lo giochi a distanza di tanto tempo, entri in una sorta di minestrone in cui è mischiato tutto quanto e non ci capisci assolutamente niente. Zero. Questo è il problema. Quindi di nuovo recuperatelo su YouTube, vi conviene.
in a way, just staying ahead of that curve and making sure that everything, again, is of purpose and telling this much longer story.
Loro adesso stanno creando le prossime 3 espansioni, una prossima saga. È una cosa che non hanno mai fatto prima. È una sfida. Sì, appunto. Esatto.
It's one of the most nuclear creative phases I've seen for Warcraft. But the pace is wild. Right? Like the pace is wild. And it's like I ain't 30 anymore, so we joke around all the time like, we need to start instituting, company naps in the middle of the afternoon for the old folks.
Ci sono le linee aziendali da boomer.
It has been pretty amazing.
That's a great way.
No, il classic non ce la fai a rivivere le cose. A meno che non ti inizi a giocare singolarmente i singoli classic, che però è un delirio.
Chris is Anduin in some ways, kind of worn out, beaten up by a straight period of like nonstop work, right? But also on the other end of it, he's a little bit back to being Thrall again. And those two characters represent these two parts of who this person is. How much of these characters moving forward, or even in the past, have represented you where you were in your life? Like some people say, well, the early versions of these characters are they were so metal. Like even Tauren chieftains, they look like, these metal dudes and everything. And now they're aging, right? They're maturing. They're moving on in the world. Like you are, like everyone who's worked on this does. Like that's time. Do you think that's a fair thing to say, that we'll see these characters change and evolve in the same way that maybe you have, and they're kind of your avatars?
Yeah, no, I know where you're going. So there's kind of an A and a B there. Like the B, which is easier, is certainly we want to push these characters forward. We want to show some aging. We are currently doing that. But yeah, we talk about that a lot. There are many new characters over the arc of the saga that,
il film è un insulto al gioco, era accettabile, è abbastanza un insulto al gioco. Alla fine me lo sono visto lo stesso, non mi è dispiaciutissimo, però infatti ha pure fatto un po' flop, se non erro.
Like capture that age up, not necessarily age out, but like, okay, so in that cinematic at BlizzCon, they went in and put like gray streaks in Thrall's hair. I'm like, oh,
it looked great.
It got me. It's like, whoa. And just Anduin, staring you down. It's like our little boys all grows up. It's.
You feel for him. You're supposed to feel for him, right?
Which was the point. But just the idea that these characters are moving through their own continuum and progressing and moving through stuff. Like, what a trip. Looking back from where we started. To the point where these are fairly fully realized characters within this setting, and it's just incredibly satisfying that way to see that progression. And certainly us as storytellers, as people, as we, it's not necessarily, it is certainly getting older, but it's also just experience over time. Big life moments, becoming parents, finding love, finding your career, all these big kind of life, hurdles. It's like, I tell folks all the time, like, don't be afraid to pour yourself into this stuff, even when you're like, oh God, will the people down the hall dig it? Will I be judged? Like, yes, probably. But the answer is you're an artist. Go get it, right? Find your truth. Because often when, we're pulling from a place of like deeply personal experience, someone's going to feel that on the other end of the line, as you're playing the game. It's like some of those themes that really matter. Whether you're a writer, quest designer, narrative folks, cinematics, like the game design, like everyone kind of pours themselves into their.
Sì, con WoW francamente vi dico di iniziare dalle espansioni più recenti e recuperare la storia prima. Purtroppo è così.
I think you get more genuinely affecting content. I think people feel that. They feel you in it one way or another. There are many themes embedded in the World Soul Saga, evidenced by different characters, that are very pointedly things that I think today, or I'm struggling with today, for sure. But again, I think about it in terms of like, as the team's creative leader, that's not the job as much. I think the job is like trying to learn to call them out, and challenge them to kind of breathe their own experience into it, as opposed to pouring my own in. So it's a balance.
I assume that's what, over time, you have a character. We'll stick with Thrall for a minute. He's, probably the most well-known of the Chris Metzen, and certainly voice him. So
until they find somebody better.
Until they find somebody better. Maybe you'll age out of it. I don't know. We're getting there. But no, that you've breathed enough life into that character and given them enough direction over so much time.
Tra il
that I
personaggio è
have to think in
fighissimo.
a lot of cases, they start to run on their own gas. And while I'm not asking you to tell me if there's any tragedy coming at all, we're not even suggesting it here.
I have a kill list.
Do you?
I've got like my top 12 characters. Like they're all going.
Why is Khadgar at the top of the list? I kid. I love Khadgar.
There's no kill list.
All right, good. But you know what I mean? You might find yourself going, well, it might be time for character X to take a character dive.
We so there's no, I'm kidding, there's no kill list necessarily. But we do talk about this stuff all the time. And the only, when you start talking about knocking off main characters, it's not a small thing. And usually that is in service to, in the general story you're developing, if you really need to punctuate, dramatic stakes, the easiest thing to do is, ask Lucas, blow up a planet or, knock off a main character.
Tyrion Fordling, for example.
Tyrion.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I remember that.
I'm still gripping on that one.
Yeah, that was rough. No pressure, though. I'm just saying it was a rough moment.
No pressure. So we do talk about it from time to time, but we try and frame it with, the greatest gravity possible and trying to be clear that, this franchise has another 20 years in it. It's this big ongoing idea, and losing critical characters is costly. So it's, we talk about it from time to time. I won't tell you, we won't.
La morte di Vol'jin, che mi ricordo io, per santi Dio, è stata una cosa che mi ha lasciato un po' perplesso, devo dire.
Engagement from the player ultimately. So,
Does it help populate the World Soul Saga as a creative place to know that over the last few years, while you were gone for much of it, the team has made a real effort or a priority out of having allied races discovered in the world that players can not only unlock but then be and might prefer over the originals or whatever? Like, this additional diversity for choice seems like a really potent way to fill your world with more interesting characterization rather than just, well, it's orcs and humans and a few others.
Yeah, I love it. Just old school D&D and all these options on, player expression, what kind of, what culture you want to be from. I love that kind of stuff. So opening that up, especially like, Battle for Azeroth and, the inclusion of all these new silhouettes and flavors or whatever, I thought was awesome, actually. And even the ones I didn't think I would play, I wound up, I rolled a Volpera hunter, and then I consistently dress him like Robin Hood from the old Disney movie. So it's like, I actually really dig
che
a lot of
ricordi,
flavors that have been
film
added
Disney
over
di
time.
Robin Hood.
Like it's, in my opinion, the water's warm, everybody in the pool. I think WoW can stretch and grow to, encapsulate all of these flavors. I think giving, players more options, more visual options is awesome. At the end of the day, I think, erring on the side of, player choice, player agency is the right move, like why you're playing this game in the first place, right? When you imprint, especially when it's your character, when you imprint on a look or a vibe or, like a vision that you connect with, it's like, go, get it.
So let's bring it full circle to what is imminent, which is the war within. Players have a lot of expectations. Some of it is based on just excitement because there is a 3-part saga coming. They're not used to that. There's a whole new structure to this. So what would you say to players who are pins and needles about this next expansion, the start of the big grand story?
As we were talking about earlier, we've never been in a situation where we've shaped the whole giddy up, all at once. So there's the adventure component of the War Within, and then there's the max level campaign, and then there's the subsequent patches, and it's all been designed to kind of play out over time. Narrative threads and sinews, kind of linking everything together. Personally, a little biased, but I think it's off the hook, right? At the end of the day, I would want people to remember it is still only, however, part one of a much larger narrative. And I would want people
Quindi hanno
to look at
grandi
it
piani
that
anche
way.
per il futuro.
It's meant to rise and
Nico.
crescendo with its own max level campaign.
Will I be expected to walk in quest one
no, non l'ho
and
visto, poi
yank
lo vado a
the sword
recuperare.
from the planet?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say to that, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the sword, the resolution of the sword that we started with at BlizzCon, actually, that's a 13 thing. We're going to build to that, and it's a doozy.
One does not simply yank a sword from Azeroth.
I would even say you are not prepared for that moment. and leave it at that. But it is a 13 issue. Ultimately, you know, things like Xalatathi, we've been doing a lot of work to kind of build her up as a very different kind of villain. She is not like a Deathwing type, you know, villain where, you know, just he's flying and burning everything and like, oh crap, you know, we're gonna, you know, like clearly he's where the storyline ends. She's built in such a way that like we're gonna be confronted by her and face her multiple times over the arc of the saga. So it's not going to be this, you know, one and done type like, oh, you know, she's the raid boss. You know, she's meant to, you know, kind of weave in and out of events over time. So that's something I would say. But definitely the sword thing sticks in my head. You know, like certain of these themes are built to play out over time.
No, non l'ho visto.
So I hope people are into that. I hope they're into, you know, a longer form engagement. Because in a way, you know, so many of our expectations kind of, you know, crystallize around like, well, wait a minute, I didn't get the full meal I was expecting in 11.0. It's not built to be that. It's built to be part one. So buckle up, you know, the ride will be, I hope, insane and insane.
Questa è una cosa che mi dà anche un pochettino di preoccupazione però.
That promise of the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft, like, I want this saga to feel like it is just the perfect crescendo of 20 years of storytelling, you know.
Addirittura.
As we said at BlizzCon.
Yeah, there is a sense that we are fulfilling something. The 20 years came and will end this November. I guess November's launch, right? Yeah, 20-year anniversary will be this November. Yeah. And there is a feeling, I can tell you from the player side, of really coming to something special. And I know that puts pressure on the team when players collectively have an idea that they think should happen, and then the team's like, well, we're kind of going a different way. But I don't know that I've felt this much positive feedback in a long time about just where things are headed. And nobody says that about
Metzen.
Property usually we're like,
there's not a lot of precedent we have, right? Like that's the same contiguous project. There's plenty of game series run for 20 years, no question. But like, it is honestly a blessing and a, you know, often sometimes a hindrance. Just trying to, you know, sift through the sheer volume of all of these details. Poor Sean Copeland, right? You know, just trying to keep it all, you know, make it all make sense. But it is also its principal strength. You know, particularly because it's an MMO and a video game, because you've lived these moments. You didn't just passively watch. You didn't just, you know, read a book or watch a movie. You've lived these moments and they matter and there are stakes, you know, so as complex as it is to try and push the world forward without breaking everything that came before, which is its own kind of challenge. It's a very noble challenge, right? It's a privilege to tread water in this complexity of this setting. After all of these years, it's amazing that it's still the same stakes. It's still the same world that you've always known.
Well, there's a future I see where you're, you know, reclining in some sort of chair.
With the blanket over my
knees, keeping you warm, and you're looking back and you're thinking...
Telling kids to stay off my lawn.
Yeah, exactly. And they're all in their haptic suits playing whatever version of WoW they have. And looking back at Grandpa's accomplishments, and I think it looks like something to be pretty proud of already. Well, I, for one, could not be more excited about this next expansion and the entirety of the World Soul Saga, and I think you and your team should be proud, and I wish you guys nothing but luck in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was good fun. That was hard. We're never gonna get that.
Ok, allora, diciamo che ho avuto un po' una sensazione mista da tutto questo, devo dirvi, perché per carità, Chris Metzen è sempre lui, c'è grande fiducia in lui e tutto quello che volete. Diciamo che quello che voglio dirvi si ricollega un po' a quello che ho detto quando l'hanno richiamato. Io ero uno di quelli ovviamente contentissimo di questo, d'accordo? Però c'è anche un'altra cosa da dire, è che, come ha detto qualcuno giustamente, Sant'Iddio hanno dovuto proprio richiamarlo per tirare fuori il carro da dove si era impantanato, giusto? Nel senso, è dovuto ritornare il creatore che se n'era andato già tanti anni prima per riportare un po' tutto in auge come si deve, giusto? E io sono contento che questo sia successo, ma mi domando, Sant'Iddio, se era veramente necessario. Evidentemente sì, il che non mi fa ben pensare per il futuro. D'altra parte Chris Metzen pare avercela una visione. Gran parte del video francamente è stato molto nostalgico, no? Un video che guarda indietro ai personaggi, a come sono state narrate le storie, eccetera eccetera, come un senso di oh mio Dio, eravamo giovani, adesso siamo vecchi, sono passati 20 anni dalla creazione di Warcraft e quindi abbiamo visto crescere tutti questi personaggi. È stata una sorta di connessione emotiva che secondo me però appartiene solo a una parte di giocatori. Francamente io un po' ce l'ho, perché le ho vissute praticamente tutte quelle vicende lì, quindi per me va bene questa cosa qua. Però da un lato WoW per buona parte della sua storia non è stato pensato come un gioco a cui connettersi emotivamente con le vicende di questi personaggi, e solo da un certo punto in poi ha cominciato a fare una storia vera e propria che si dipanava con tanti eventi e cose del genere. Se pensate a WoW ai tempi del Vanilla, ma anche Burning Crusade, sì, c'erano degli avvenimenti e delle cose che potevi seguire, ma era più un vai a verificare questa cosa e quell'altra e vivi la storia come pezzi di lore da unire insieme e che ti raccontano qualcosa, no? Un po' più alla Dark Souls, se vogliamo. E adesso invece non lo è, e quindi il WoW di cui stanno parlando adesso è il WoW più moderno, che non si ricollega tanto con quello vecchio, che però sta davvero indietro, e comunque per quello c'è il Classic, no? Ora, che cosa ci possiamo aspettare da The War Within e da questa nuova World Soul Saga? Io diciamo sono possibilista, nel senso che è tornato Chris Metzen, quindi vorrei poter dire che è una garanzia, più che altro lo spero tanto. Quello che penso è che pare abbiano davvero dei piani grossi per il futuro, che stiano preparando delle cose importanti, e quindi ok, voglio dire, con questa espansione hanno dimostrato dal lato tecnico che un po' di cose l'hanno capite, con 10 anni di ritardo però l'hanno capite, e però il fatto che sia una saga e quindi questa saga comprende le prossime 3 espansioni, non vorrei che la fine di The War Within vi lasciasse un po' appesi come non lo so, sapete, le trilogie di Star Wars, che sì, per carità, soprattutto quelle più moderne, no? Ti lasciano un po' lì sapendo che ci sono degli altri pezzi, no? Ecco, spero tanto che sia soddisfacente, perché sennò bisogna aspettare 2 anni tra l'uno e l'altro, quindi è un po'... 2 anni oltretutto se va... No, aspetta, non è vero. Avevano comunicato che avrebbero accelerato il fluire di contenuti, il che mi sta anche bene, se questi contenuti sono buoni. Ora, speriamo tanto che la cosa però evolva così. Sapete, sono ancora nella fase che sono rimasto così scottato da Blizzard che non riesco più a riconnettermi emotivamente con la facilità con cui riuscivo a farlo prima. Anche se c'erano dei periodi in cui mi potevo stufare, in cui ero un po' scontento di Blizzard, altre cose, passavano dei periodi in cui, vabbè, poi esce la nuova espansione e tu la giochi, non ci pensi neanche. Con Dragonflight questa cosa, per esempio, non è successa. Non ci ho voluto giocare per tanto tempo, nonostante ne stessero parlando bene fin dall'inizio di questa espansione. L'ho recuperata solo più tardi per il puro gusto di dire ok, almeno la gioco così ve ne posso parlare. Con questa sono curioso di alcune feature, sono abbastanza intrigato da quello che stanno promettendo, sono più o meno possibilista, ma sapete, sono come quello che è stato tradito tante volte, dice ok, adesso lei o lui sembrano davvero cambiati, però ci vai coi piedi di piombo. Ecco, sono più o meno in questa fase io, quindi speriamo bene che vada bene, e tanto lo sapremo a breve, perché l'accesso anticipato è fra 2, adesso siamo in live in questo momento, fra letteralmente 2 ore scarse c'è l'inizio dell'accesso anticipato, quindi credo che lo scopriremo. Come vi ho detto, io lo giocherò, non so se proprio al day one, vediamo se mi danno la chiave, però sono curioso di provare un po' di feature e vedere come evolve la storia. Questo è quanto, ragazzi, speriamo bene.